Welcome to episode 631 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and it is the international break, so that means it's time to talk about some big ideas. And you know, one of the guys that I have on to help me do that, always coming from Barca Football or Barca Football Live on social media, it's Domagoj Kostanchuk. Thanks so much for joining me again, Domagoj, because I think we're going to do our best today in the national break to keep people engaged.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, it's always lovely to be here. And yes, another international break. There's so many of them lately, but at least, as you say, it gives us a chance to actually discuss things that are, maybe out of the way a little bit. So let's try.
Yeah, well, I do want to say first that while Dev from Barca Football as well couldn't join us today, we will plug where the three of us plus another will be together. So again, you'll have to wait till the end of the show to plug on a special project that we've been working on as well. That'll be coming out in the next week as well. But for now, I think we're going to look back just a little bit because today I did name the show One Injury Away. Because as interesting enough as that big idea is, Hansi Flick's Barcelona is still top of the table in the Liga. They're still in the top 8 in the Champions League standings. They put up more goals than any other team in Europe's top 5 leagues, and it's not even close. But after the loss against Real Sociedad, coupled with Ansu Fati's most recent injury today, and Pau Cubarsi's call-up to the Spanish national team that I kind of wish wouldn't have happened, all that got me thinking that Barcelona might be, just as I said, one injury away from suffering some tough results for a little bit of time or coupling a few negative results in a row. Now, while I am interested about the idea of no Lamine Yamal against Real Sociedad, I do want to start with talking about the Real Sociedad press that gave Barca so much trouble because I think fundamentally there's a Lamine Yamal absence component of it, but I do think that Real Sociedad's press was something that Barcelona would have struggled with regardless of whether or not the 17-year-old superstar is there or not. And it might be something to improve upon as well. So from that Real Sociedad press, Domagoj, what did you see that concerned you or maybe gave you hope that Barca can fix some of the issues against that press?
Yeah, there's a lot in there, and Sociedad are among the most intense pressers in Europe, even I think. So it doesn't surprise that it gave us trouble. And Barca actually had a team on the pitch that night that could, in theory at least, so on paper, handle high pressure, right? They had Frenkie, they had Casado on that double pivot. And I think that's a good enough base to actually play through Real Sociedad. And to be fair to us, to Barca, they have done so a couple of times in the first half. The first 15 or so minutes were actually good. When I rewatched the game, you could see there were holes in the middle that Barca were able to exploit very, very nicely because Sociedad did press with a kind of 5 players up front, right? And Barca normally had 6, even if you call Lewandowski dropping into those spaces between the lines. Barca could create overloads and access those players between the lines and then through that space carry the ball forward. And they have done so a couple of times in the opening 10 or so minutes, and that gave me hope actually for us to recognize, okay, here's the space, here's what the opposition structure is not at its finest, and then use that against them. That to me, that was really good. And in that sequence, when you see Frenkie de Jong actually carrying the ball in that space, that was the sequence for our first goal that got ruled out in the end. But that was the same principle. So Frenkie receiving in space beyond that first line of press, because Sociedad, when they press, they always leave those gaps. They are very disjointed. They don't have the compactness. They have the intensity in the first line, which is the line of 5 players. So you have 2 on the pivots, 2 on the center backs, and so that's more. And then you have 1 more as the backup. Is that 5? Yeah, that's 5. And then behind them, there's like a big gap. And then there's the rest of the team. And in those gaps, you can position Frenkie de Jong, you can position Lewandowski or Rafinha or Lamine. If he was on the pitch, he would be there in those spaces, right? Or you have someone like Olmo or Fermin Lopez kind of navigating those areas in between the lines and receiving the ball there and then carrying the ball. Now, a couple of instances, there was Frenkie de Jong who managed to slip into that space and receive the ball and then do what he does best, which is carry the ball forward. And that's what Barca's goal, actually is created. Now, on the flip side, Real Sociedad did the same thing that PSG did, and the same thing that other teams will try and replicate, and that's kind of prioritizing. Okay, this player can have more space and time on the ball. This player cannot. So if Indigo receives the ball or Kubarsi receives the ball, which when happens from Peña to Indigo or Kubarsi, they immediately press. Right, they are very aggressive. If Peña is on the ball, they're like, okay, fine, we can leave this guy in more space and time because he is not as threatening as the other players. And when you look at the numbers, Peña had quite high pass percentages because he was making the easier passes to the center backs. He had like 5 long balls or something, but he missed 3 of those. So whenever they forced him into something that was slightly more difficult, slightly more complex, he couldn't do it, right? So as long as you cut off Barca's or Peña's easier targets, he cannot really do what Ter Stegen does, for example. And that's a big issue if you want to bypass a highly man-marking press, because how do you do that? Having a good distributor from the goalkeeping position is crucial for that, right? So playing over the press is sometimes a very effective way to actually navigating that sort of structure. And then I think one of those, the goal from Real Sociedad came from that very same thing. Peña goes long, right? Peña goes long. We lose the second ball. Castro is put into an aerial duel. He loses that, unsurprisingly as well. And then there's a deep run from the second line, and Barca concede a goal. So it was that goal was actually a combination of all the things that Barca currently struggle with, and one of which is the distribution from the goalkeeping position, which is an issue because all Peña could do throughout the night was pass to the center backs, and then they would get collapsed upon, and that was it. There was no other real pattern or not real option for him because number one, okay, you don't really have those options because Real Sociedad are very good at cutting those off. But number two, your goalkeeper cannot really invent solutions even if he has to in those situations. So it was a kind of a tough situation to be in, and it doesn't surprise me that was exactly what gave the goal away in the end.
Yeah, I want to mention too on the goal, not to make excuses or have a cop out here, but that ball from Pena, as you said, was over the head of Lewandowski. Didn't really give him
Yeah,
a chance to keep that up there. And then Casado, it looked to me that he also slipped just a little bit. That's why he
could be.
lost that 50-50 in the rain because players were slipping and sliding everywhere. And then Kubarsi also slipped at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, which
Mm-hmm.
allowed Becker to get in behind Kunde. And Kunde also didn't track the run either. So as I had said on the 5 headlines, I kind of say for that Barcelona goal, yes, Real Sociedad deserved it because of the system that they were pressing with and their unity and all those different factors, right? I'm not making an excuse, but a lot had to go wrong on that particular play. But that's kind of how goals are scored. That players make mistakes and players they wind up finding good spots. I mean, but I also throw it away. Like unlike the second goal that Red Star Belgrade had scored last Wednesday, where that is just a goal that I clap and I go, that's just a Golazo, like awesome job, like good on you. He scored the second goal, right? And that's different than I think what Real Sociedad did, where the goal was scored almost as in tennis you call it an unforced error, right? It's where you're the one who makes the mistake and the opposition just got the point for it. And that's a bit what I, not to take anything away from the goal itself, but I felt like Real Sociedad, they would have earned a goal if any team earned a goal, but that's again not how football works. And to your point, yeah, I want to even add more context and numbers to what you were saying, that Real Sociedad pressing in that 2-5-3, the solution, as you said, to that is true. Like it's to play it long and to especially playing between the different lines of that press. The more you can set up in the middle, the more it works out for you. But here's some of the numbers here. The Blaugrana were forced to go long 26 times in 45 minutes. And as you said, the press for Real Sociedad, if anything, they didn't get more tired as many teams do over the course of that game. It seemed like playing at home, playing in those conditions emboldened them. And if anything, they got tighter and more disciplined, which again did not help Barcelona. And to your point, they were also leaving one man open for Barcelona, and that was Iñaki Peña saying, hey, if you can beat us, then we're going to be fine with that. And Barcelona in that game went long 55 times. On average, they go long 40. So that, again, tells me that they were just forced into an unnatural position that, yes, going vertical and going long is a part of their game. Some of the best goals they've scored this season was going vertical, especially that combination of Kubarsi either in behind to Rafinha or up to Lewandowski. He brings it down, holds it up for a little bit, and then Barcelona off to the races, all those different things. Or that crossfield ball to Balde, then Balde immediately gets to the middle, and those combinations in the middle all work out because those midfielders then push forward and are sitting between those lines. So those are a lot of things that work out for Barcelona. But even Real Sociedad, we talk a lot even about the line of confrontation. We said that a high line was worrisome for Barcelona this season or whatever, but it wasn't the high line necessarily was the issue. Is that if anything, Real Sociedad's press was pushing Barcelona farther back. So when they were playing long and not winning those balls, they weren't able to bring forward their attack and they weren't able to sit. And again, for those watching, I'm putting it here. It's better for Barcelona if they are with the ball, they're narrow in a horizontal way, right? And then when they're trying to transition forward, it's much more horizontal vertically. And even like when they go to defend, they want to defend narrow, and that's how they keep their high line in order. But we also see that they picked the ball off 14 times, so 14 recoveries in Barcelona's half. 14 more times in the middle of the field, they just kept winning those points. And I know it seems so simple, but again, it's a very simple idea that if you go forward with one pass, it doesn't really move the press. But if you can move the press twice, as in you get one ball, this is a successful pass, that second ball is then what can get you in between the lines and allow you to win the second ball. But if Real Sociedad is able to set up their, as we call it, their rest defense, where they know they can just win the press on the first ball because it's going to be a long ball. And if you win that 50-50, then you're off to the races. That put them in a good spot. So even again, we're adding more context here because Real Sociedad never jumped on Pena. And again, this is a lot of credit to Alex Damas for a lot of these points. Again, he's one of the best tactical heads out there. Again, he's a follow that came on the show a few weeks ago. So listen to that show. We talked about the press there. And then you can also give him a follow on social media. But because they never pressed Pena, and then as you said, Domagoj, they had Kubo and Orzabal on the two center backs in a man-to-man press. And then it was Becker, who is the speedier one. He was in the middle and then looking to attack Koundé. That meant that Aramburu on the other side, he had to be beaten by Balde or Frenkie also shading to the left. It had to work out that way. And so, as you mentioned, that was the weakness that they had. If Rafinha and Frenkie and Balde could figure something out on that left side, you could then get into that space that Real Sociedad were leaving available. But Barcelona did that once in the whole game. And as you said, it leads to a goal that winds up being VAR and all those different things like that. So those are the big ideas. I talked for a lot here. So if you don't have anything to add to that idea, we can shift gears a little bit to Lamine Yamal because I don't want to make an excuse for Barcelona. This was that game because Monaco was the red card. Osasuna was, I said, heavy rotation and just whatever. Yeah. This was the first game that Barcelona under Hansi Flick were outplayed. When I said, no, they were not the best team out there on the field today. And that would be the concern for me. But if I'm going to use an excuse, the excuse is that Lamine Yamal was unavailable. And that does change fundamentally everything Barcelona could do in the attack. Because yes, they had the VAR goal called off, but they, in theory, could have still won this game 2-1.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I think, it's an issue with Barcelona because Lamine, of course, he has the quality itself, but Barca don't really have the profile to replace him either. So when he goes down, who goes there, right? You can put a player there. You can put Rafinha, you can put Fermin, as we saw against Real Sociedad, but they don't offer the same things as Lamine, right? So it changes the whole complexity of the team, right? Everything changes just because of one injury, right? And when you're in that position, you suffer a lot. You see it happened for Real Madrid with Toni Kroos, for example. They don't have someone to replace him like for like. Even if it's not the same quality, if it's the same profile, the system can still work to a certain degree, right? It will be of lesser quality, but it will still have the same functionality, right? And the same for Manchester City and Rodri, for example. He goes down. They don't have a like for like, so the whole system has to change. And the same for Barcelona. Lamine goes down, and Flick doesn't have anyone who can replicate what Lamine does. Even if that someone, imagine if someone does a worse job than Lamine, which is likely, he still does similar things, and the whole system can be still based on the same principles, right? But when you have a player that's fundamentally different, like Fermin, for example, on the right side, and then you still have the rest of the team more or less the same, it won't work the same way, right? Because that one key piece is so different that it changes everything, how everyone works, right? We saw with Rafinha, we saw with Lewandowski, who were not, both of them were not as effective because Rafinha didn't have distribution from the right side. He didn't have anyone to feed him those passes or to find him in those areas that he likes to occupy, right? So it's fundamentally different to have Fermin there. I mean, it's a general thing to say. It's everyone knows this, but it is true. And another thing on the press was Barca, when Pena had the ball, they didn't play through Frenkie or Casado as much as they maybe should have, right? Because those are the players that can, in theory, break the press on their own through carrying the ball, right? We try to pass the ball very vertically, as you say. We have a large number of passes throughout the game, but those passes were just verticality for the sake of the verticality and trying to get rid of the ball rather than actually having a steady plan, a design in place, right? Because why is Flick's verticality different from Xavi's verticality? Because Flick's verticality was more based on a plan, on a structure, on a design, right? So this is the area where we are actually very vertical. This is the area where we retain the ball. This is the area where we actually do something else. So he had a plan in place. And largely the verticality comes from the first line. So the center backs are very vertical for Flick, and that won't change. It was the same thing against Sociedad as well. However, under Xavi, what used to happen is we just hoof the ball forward with just for the sake of it, right? It felt that way a lot of the times, right? Under Flick, not so much. But this time around against Sociedad, it felt like I was watching, and I don't want to throw shade at Xavi, but it felt like I was watching Xavi's team more than I was watching Flick's team because they
Mm.
just didn't play to their strengths. They ignored their main ball handlers in Castro and Frenkie. If you look at Peña's connections on the pitch to numbers, he has a lot of connections with the center backs and the fullbacks, but he has like one pass with Frenkie, one pass with Castro. And yes, they were the tougher choices because they were constantly man marked, but you still take that risk because Frenkie can do that under pressure. Castro can also do it under pressure. So you would rather play into that and have this build up from the back that kind of minimizes the variance in the game than go long and risk it, right? Because you know if you don't win that first ball, the second ball, you're toast, right? Real Sociedad will launch a counter attack and they will actually be in a better position to win those balls than you are because they have those tools to do that. So in a sense, I think Barca were playing more in a way that suited Real Sociedad and themselves. And that to me was a big thing. And yeah, with that, I will hand it back to you, Dan.
Yeah, again, it seems really simple, but it's true. Without Lamine Yamal, here's the things that Lamine Yamal does. Like, there's like the big three, right? He, because of his verticality, he pushes that block deeper. So we
Mhm.
also said if they're going to mark man to man,
Yeah,
then they're going to have to start that defense, as we said, rest defense, that line of conversation is going to be pushed back with Lamine Yamal attacking you vertically with the ball. So with ball to feet, which is unlike what Lewandowski and Rafinha, the way that they attack you in that front line. Same thing with Fermin Lopez, actually. He's also, I would call, a runner more than a dribbler, right? So he's attacking you. All three of your front three are attacking the same way. So neither of the three are attacking with the ball. As you said, the midfielders are the ones getting ball to feet and then dribbling forward into that space and attacking you. So again, if the guys with the ball at their feet are coming from the midfield, that means that the block is a little bit higher. If it's a forward, that means that block has to be a little bit deeper. Two is the big one I keep saying. Lamine Yamal opens up so much space for everyone else because he requires a second defender along that back line to come over. So in that 2-5-3 that Real Sociedad were pressing in, if the ball is somehow, especially wide, getting to Lamine Yamal out there on that right wing, then that means one of the five either has to drop in and make it a 4-4-2. Yes, I know how to count. Or or right, or they'll have to basically come with five at the back, and then they'll have to bring the two to him with the midfielder and then the left back and actually play with a left back on that press and build up. And then the third thing is the guy just straight up makes things happen. And when I say guy, I mean kid. The kid just makes things happen, right? I mean, his crossing and all those different things are totally different. And speaking of those crosses, right? Barca ended that day. This is another telling stat with more crosses than any other match this season, where they had 25 crosses against Real Sociedad. They averaged 16. So that just tells you that not that they were spamming crosses, but that became the solution because they didn't have somebody with the ball on that forward line dribbling at the opposition, and those spaces just weren't opening up for the other runners. So they were just trying to cross it in and see if they could do something there. And the other thing is too, again, this is a lot of credit to Alex Damas. Again, on this point, again, he's a former professional footballer, so he knows this. None of the crosses were coming from as in their teammates' opposite foot, as in the opposite foot that's going to swing the way that the cross is not expected to swing. And again, that just changes the angle for you so much. So yeah, I feel like those little simple things again sound on paper like it is, as I said, I keep using that word, but simple, but that's not the case. I think it's really telling, the report this week that came out, that again, this also comes from some Catalan sources as well, that Tony Fernandez, who is currently out until December, that people around the club have said that they find that he could be a very good replacement. Now, remember, he is only a 16-year-old winger who's barely playing for Barca Athletic, but they find him the closest like for like player to Lamine Yamal. So I do think it's really interesting that he is kind of already been tipped as a player to potentially come and be a reinforcement for Lamine Yamal this season, because again, the club is asking a lot of Lamine Yamal. And then the final point here is, yes, about that verticality as well, that press from Sociedad was able to press much more narrow because the ball on the wings wasn't going the
yeah,
way it needed to, right? So I think in that game, I probably would have, and we can talk about Ansu Fati here in a second, but I would have started Ansu and had Rafinha on the right, because I think that solves the same, or that doesn't solve the same problems that you had anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Frankie de Jong situation is another conversation we could
Yeah.
have about Pedri playing as a 10, because Pedri should have been playing where he's been best this season, which is as a pivot.
Yeah.
Probably with all the 10s you have, like I'll promote the video I did a few weeks ago that now seems really, really smart. Barcelona had number 10s in spades. Like for all those years with Messi, they kept saying, I used Fabregas as an example a few weeks ago that, there was a guy who played the 10 that with Messi there, Griezmann, Fabregas, that just Coutinho for years and years are like, Barca's like, we don't need a 10. We have this right winger who is the 10 who, that's Messi. But now Barcelona, even in the academy, have a lot of players that can play as that attacking midfielder role in front of the two pivots and behind the front three. And, they again had to use another one of those on the right wing in Fermin, right? But to start Pedri in that position then just fundamentally didn't make sense, because that's the one position that you did have playing their natural position. But that means you have to sit Frenkie. And that's right. Can you sit Frenkie? Or should you be sitting Frenkie? Or, you know what I mean? Like, you need him to be coming back and making things happen. So, Domagoj, I talked way too long. I almost need a break. But I think where I want you to answer next is kind of that question. Like, I guess you can start with the question, and we go from there. Like, is Barcelona one injury away? Well, I think if Lamine Yamal was gone for 3 to 4 months, Barcelona would be in a whole heaping amount of trouble. And any big matches that Lamine Yamal is unavailable for, even in Real Sociedad or even the best of the Liga, then Barcelona might be in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, there might be. It's no surprise because you can't replace Lamine, and even if you wanted to, you don't have the profile, as we said, right? So I think I agree with you. I agree with you on the whole Fati and Rafinha thing. I think having Fati as the left winger and then Rafinha as the right winger would have been the better choice for Flick. I don't know why he went with Fermin on the right, because I just don't see the benefit of that. That front line with Fermin on the right, Lewandowski and then Rafinha, it doesn't have the same balance, right? You just have you have two runners and a poacher, and you don't really have the service, right? You don't have anyone to actually gel that together. Now, in theory, if you have Rafinha on the right and then you have someone like Ansu on the left, you still have a creator on the right side. Right? So Rafinha can be someone who can do those in-swinging crosses once he cuts in, and he can do that. He has the ball striking, he has the creativity from the pass as well. This season, he's been more of a goal scorer than a goal creator, but he can still do it, right? He can still be that someone who can somewhat hold the width initially and then cut in later, which is what Lamine does anyway. So in that sense, you would have more balance than what we did with the structure that Flick went with in the end. But yes, I think to answer your question, one injury away, I think in some cases, which is obviously Lamine, yes, the drop off is so drastic that yes, it could lead to much bigger problems, right? We did lose, and partly because, of course, there was no Lamine. Now, is that the same for the rest of the team? I think we have several positions that are in danger of going down the same route, where you have an injured player and then you don't have anyone to really replace that player.
Can I say real quick, because
Yeah,
Ter Stegen already pushing this idea, right? Ter
yeah,
Stegen out for the year, Iñaki Peña has to be the guy, and we see, like, again, there's no blame to be put on this. I'm not even blaming Hansi Flick. I'm saying that Real Sociedad exploited what Barcelona could not do well without Lamine Yamal, and they were the better team, right? So I'm giving credit to Real Sociedad more than I'm taking away from Barcelona. But just to throw it out there, like, Ter Stegen would have been an example here, and I would have put him on this list with Iñaki Peña. But Iñaki Peña is also, in other games against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, been good enough that Barcelona did not, like, structurally have to worry about him. So, I mean, I know that we say that Iñaki Peña isn't good enough, but he also has been, since Ter Stegen went down, been good enough, and enough instances where we say that, okay, maybe Barcelona can survive and win trophies without Ter Stegen. Now, as far as what you're about to say next, like, I going through this thought experiment, because Lamine Yamal in total has 5 goals, 7 assists, but as I said, like, just what he changes with the ball at his feet, the whole system can revolve around Lamine Yamal, and he just makes things happen. But I then have 6 players that I say, if blank went down, then Barcelona, I think, are in a bit of trouble, because I think the system is built for, if those 6 players are unavailable for a long stretch of time, Barcelona just don't have the horses to replace it, replace that player. I don't know. Do you want to play this as a game? I guess, like, we don't have enough fun. You and I, like, talk tactics and are really boring. So
yeah, we can
can
play
you
again. Yeah.
see? Yeah, I just want to see if I have 6 names here,
Mm-hmm.
as 7 with Lamine Yamal, which again is like half the starting 11, so it's not that crazy. But can you name the 6 players that I have here that if they went down for, let's say, 2 months, Barcelona would I think, drop results in quick succession.
Right. Okay. Lewandowski.
14 goals, 2 assists. Yeah, that makes sense. They don't have a
does
number 9.
does Ter Stegen count, or does he is he not?
No, I didn't
No,
put.
he
Yes,
can't.
I think Inaki Pena, they're going to be without him, and Inaki
Hmm.
Pena has proven in big
Okay.
games that he's
Right.
been reliable enough.
Okay. I don't know if you count Rafinha in there. I would say Rafinha as well because
I absolutely count Rafinha. Yeah, I
okay,
mean, who else is going to play
yeah, because
literally on
in
the
in
left wing?
yeah, in theory you have a lot of left wingers, so that's why I thought okay maybe you don't count it, but yeah, I would put him in left. So Rafinha,
7 goals,
Lewandowski.
8 assists. Like, he has been
I
a
know, I
superstar
know.
this season as well. Yeah.
I know. In theory, you could have players do what he does, right?
Well,
Profile
in
wise, right?
theory,
Okay, yeah.
so that point about Fermin Lopez, in
Hmm.
theory,
Hmm.
he's in the system that's built the way it is, like with that verticality on the right side, and then Koundé
Hmm.
supporting that right winger going wide. Fermin Lopez doesn't make sense as a right winger, but maybe you can get away with it with him as a left winger because it's a more an inverted position running into half spaces, right? So I think that would be the argument that, I mean, yes, if Rafinha went down, in theory, even Danny Olmo too. Like, you can get away with playing a 10 and Olmo or Fermin Lopez to run into those half spaces. Like, even Ferran Torres, when he gets back, like, in theory can run into those half spaces. But I think we've seen this season the drop off from what Rafinha has done. Again, superstar status, 7 goals, 8 assists, just cannot stop scoring, defending like hell, like just playing great. The drop off from Rafinha to Ferran Torres this season has been huge. So that's why I said if Rafinha went down for like 2 months, I think Barcelona would even lose a part of their identity defensively.
Hmm.
Like, I just
Hmm.
don't think they would have the same kind of intensity on that press. I don't think it would work the same without Rafinha.
Yeah, it would no, it would not work the same. I agree absolutely. And also, if you lose Lamine Yamal, you it just feels like you have to have Olmo in there somewhere, right? So what happens if they're
Mm.
both out? Then you're in real trouble because you don't have a player who does something out of nothing. You talked about Lamine being able to conjure something. Olmo can to a certain extent do the same thing, not at the same level as Lamine, but he can, right? He can be the magician type profile on the pitch when you don't have Lamine. That's why I feel like okay, Olmo had to be in there somewhere to compensate for not having Lamine. But okay, I digress. So back to the game. So we had Rafinha, we had Lewandowski. I'm gonna say Casado. Is that
Yes, Castro is one of them because
Casado?
I mean he's been the
Mhm.
best ball winner for Barcelona, and you
Yep.
can't play a high line if you don't have somebody in the midfield winning balls. So that's
Hmm.
as reductive as it needs to be. He's winning
All right.
balls, and you need that in a high line.
Okay, so that's three. There's six, right? I'm gonna say Kubarsi.
Oh yeah, it's definitely
Kubarsi.
Kubarsi. Like, his long passing and his diagonal balls, like
Hmm.
his defense in a high line, like that's difficult anyway. And as a
Hmm.
17-year-old to be at the level he's been at with that high line, like he's been excellent anyway defensively.
Hmm.
But his passing, as you say, like allows that system to
Yeah,
happen. You can't play a
absolutely.
high line if you do not have a center back, especially on that right side, to be able to either go long on those diagonals with some
Hmm.
accuracy, or you can play that perfectly weighted ball that can either bypass that other midfield or get all the way to your front line. Like,
Hmm.
his ball playing has been next level this season, and I don't even
Hmm.
care what the event metrics say. Like, the eye test tells me all I need to know. If Kubarsi went down, Barcelona do not like Inigo Martinez has been really good. Like,
Hmm.
obviously has been terrific. Like, leading that back line, all the things I just said about Kubarsi, Inigo
Yeah,
Martinez doing the same thing, and he's doing it because he's left-footed, which
right.
also allows you to diagonal ball over to Lamine Yamal on to the right, right? So totally, it's fair if you say the argument is Inigo Martinez, but I just think Kubarsi is that little bit extra, little special
Yeah.
with the ball at
Hmm.
his feet. So I think
Yes.
if Kubarsi went down for a long amount of time, very much like the other 17 we were just talking about, Barcelona would be
Absolutely.
a lot of trouble if their two 17-year-olds were out, which is something
Hmm.
I could not have guessed 4 years
Yeah,
ago.
that is tough. And then to think about that, there's a 16-year-old who's meant to be the replacement for the 17-year-old.
Right.
That's even
They
crazier.
are. Yeah.
But all right, okay. So that's 4 out of 6.
Yep.
Let's say I'm gonna say Pedri. Is Pedri?
Yep, it
Well,
has to be
yeah,
Pedri.
Pedri
Pedri has
has
been
to be.
Barcelona's best midfielder this season,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really telling too that if you looked at the heat map from, I mean, obviously he was playing as a 10, but
Mm-hmm.
the way that Pedri has taken over that double pivot role, now you've got four midfielders in Pedri, Gabi, De Jong, and Casado, and that is a headache that good luck, Hansi Flick, because again, you could pick the wrong combination and lose a match. But like, Pedri has been so essential to the way Barcelona have been playing that Hansi Flick still had him play the 10 and said, hey, we still need Pedri starting this game. We still need him up there because of what he does. And I think even his offensive, the things that he has done from a deep lying position with the ball at his feet have opened up everything for everyone else. Like in the past, I've criticized him about a final ball. And I think in that very vertical system that Xavi had, he was expected to get into the final third and play that final ball. But now he is playing the ball before the final ball, from that more deep lying pivot position. And he's working hard. His ball retention again, allows that high line to happen. If you have a double pivot and the double pivot doesn't lose the ball in dangerous positions, the way that unfortunately Busquets actually did in that, not last season, I thought he was excellent in the last season, but in that second to last season for Busquets, where he did occasionally, he kept losing the ball because he'd be too far away from the other midfielders, and not even his fault, but he would be left on an island. And then when they would press him with two, he would lose the ball, and they put Barcelona a world of hurt with that high line that Xavi was trying to play at the time. But Pedri, he doesn't lose the ball in positions that hurt you. And if you have a double pivot that does that, who can also, again, play a ball moving forward, yes, Pedri has been the metronome. He's been the heartbeat for Barcelona, and he's been a joy to watch. And I'll say it from the heavens, I love watching Pedri. Like, it really is a joy to watch a midfielder like that, especially still being 21.
I agree. And there was someone on Twitter said, I don't remember the name of the guy. I'll find it. I promise I'll find it. He said, Pedri is best when Pedri doesn't have anywhere to go. And to me, that line it just stuck with me, because that's true. When you corner Pedri, that's when he's at his best. He will invent something and he will just wiggle out of pressure. He will do something magical, and you'll be like, how did he do that? How is that possible? But yes, Pedri is best when he doesn't have anywhere to go. And that's what you said there, Dan, as well. He just doesn't lose the ball in those situations. He can be anywhere on the pitch, and he will just somehow find a way to do Pedri things, and that's impressive. Even from a number 10 position, which we all know he shouldn't be there. He can be the best number 10 if he wants to be. I'm sure he can evolve into that if he wants to be that. But at the moment, we need him to be something different, right? Someone who is actually involved in all the phases of play. That's who Pedri is. And to me, so see, for example, Lamine Yamal, I think he will eventually transition into a player that gets 100 touches per game. He just will. He just has that natural thing about him. Now, if that happens and he moves centrally, now the danger of being a number 10 under Flick, at least so far, is that number 10 is more of a kind of a player that doesn't see so much of the ball, right? By design, he doesn't see so much of the ball. So Lamine Yamal would, in theory, be a different kind of player if he moves centrally. Would you have him in the same role as we now see Pedri or Olmo, or those players who don't see as much of the ball, but they still have an impact, right? But they're not as involved. And you want those players to be maximal, like involved all the time. Same with Pedri, with Lamine. Those players need the ball at all times, right? So that's kind of, yeah, you were going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with Lamine Yamal, long term, I think he stays out there for exactly reasons you just said. I think his crossing ability and his ability to play balls into the box is just too dangerous. Like, it's just too dangerous to bring that inside and not have him touch the ball as much. I just want to add too on the point about Pedri. It's interesting to me that his goals per 90 are up this year, and he's playing in a deeper position, right? Like, I was always worried that he's not going to score enough, and he's scoring from deeper positions because Barcelona are in that rest defense I talk about. The line of conversation is so much higher. So Pedri is still getting on the ball in the same positions he had in Xavi's system in the opponent's final third, except he's the pivot and not the 10, right? And so you're much more solid when you have that ability to switch. And again, Costado is the one playing deeper in behind him, the way it was the case. Okay, so yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and defensively, he's been really underrated as well. Even if you look at the numbers, Pedri kind of tops some of the categories, and that's only because you just have to limit the space he needs to cover, right? If you put Pedri in a smaller kind of zone to defend, he can be the best defender out there, right? He has the brain, he even has the technique to tackle and do all those things. He just cannot do it over large distances. That's the thing. If you force Pedri to go up and down the pitch, of course, you're not using him right. And of course, he'll be less effective. And still he is when Barca are caught in the transition and Pedri has to, run from all the way from their box to our box. Of course, he won't be there. With the physique and intensity, he can't do that. But if you just have him defend a smaller zone, and that goes for every player out there, but especially for players that we have in the field, even Castro. I think Castro is a perfect counter-pressing tool, but he still isn't a large space defender, right? He can't do that. Or he can't really, if you force Castro into physical confrontations, even if it's a foot race, if it's an aerial duel, whatever it is, he will struggle. But give Castro the chance to kind of sweep up from behind and kind of be the counter-pressing tool, he can do that immensely, right? As we have seen so far in the season. Okay, but back to the game. I have one more.
Yeah, this is the last one. Yeah. So
the last one. I think you kind of gave it away by saying it's not Indigo. So okay, so I
Hmm.
have Balde left. I have Kunde left. I have who would be the number 10? It wouldn't be Olmo, right? Because I don't think it's Olmo. I'm gonna say Kunde then. Is it Kunde?
So my pick was Balde because
Oh, it was
the
Balde. All right.
yeah, because I think what I've been saying and kind of saying this all season long, and I don't need to
Mhm.
repeat it, that the drop off from Balde to Gerard Martin is just so
It is. It is.
prevalent. And again, especially going forward, like Barcelona, that high line is so much more difficult when you have all four of them. And even that the game two games ago when Gerard Martin got the start in rotation, like he it was the high line is much more dangerous when you just don't have the two center backs to kind of have to worry about it because that is what it is. Like when Balde's so far forward, it's just a three at the back of Kunde and Inigo Martinez and Kubarsi who are worrying about that high line. And as long as they're numerically matched up properly, they can step together. But adding that fourth defender there in Gerard Martin, just percentages, right? It's a lot harder then to step as a group of four than it is as a group of three on that high line. And Gerard Martin, again, he got caught the one time against Espanol or whoever it was. Yeah. And so for Ball, I think the drop off, that's what I have to do. Again, this isn't even about Kunde because Kunde Kunde is undroppable at that position, but if you had to go a few weeks without with Hector Fort, or you know what I mean, I even use Hector Fort as an example. This says more about Gerard Martin and Hector Fort and how I view those two this season than it is about Balde and Kunde. Because yes, Kunde is better than Balde, but I think the drop off from Balde to Gerard Martin this season has been greater than what Kunde to Hector Fort. Because we actually haven't seen like it's been really great to see. I was talking to Barcelona or Levon about this. We were messaging on WhatsApp yesterday about literally about Hector Fort. Like he hasn't been able to see much this season. So he asked me, and I said Hector Fort hasn't done anything that makes me in any ways an 18-year-old right back concerned about his future. He hasn't like popped off the screen at all, but like Hansi Flick is slowly bleeding him into the system, giving him the rare start here, the rare rotation. He's been off the bench like 7 times already this season, right? So it's like he is seeing the field, he is getting minutes, and he's just an all around. Like he doesn't seem to have big weaknesses other than being inexperienced, and all of the things that he does could be strengths. So that's my argument about Balde over Kunde as like my guy. That if Balde went down, I think Barcelona would have an issue on that left side in totality. Because for all that you say that Balde can't do, he also is constantly in the opponent's final third and at least does attract attention. And his runs into the middle when he picks up the ball on the touchline, that opens up so much space for Rafinha, and Gerard Martin just does not do that.
Yeah, I know, I know. If you remember, when I was on your podcast, it was a while back, and you asked me about Balde as the right back, right? And I said, okay, that's one option. But I also said one other option, which is less drastic, is have Balde invert on the left. Because in theory, and I tweeted about this a lot, in theory that just shortens the distance that his deliveries have to cross, right? So in theory, it just makes it easier because his targets are just closer to him, and in theory that makes your passes easier, right? And I think we've seen that with Flick. He's inverting a lot more from the left. He just goes up and then he goes in, and then he kind of connects with the people in those pockets in between the lines with Pedri, with Olmo, with Lewandowski. He finds those targets much easier, and I think that's one of the way to kind of help his distribution. Of course, obviously, he still has to work on the wide and high distribution, which is still not good enough. But this way, at least, he's having an easier time finding those targets. But yeah, to your point, he is kind of a big part of that whole team because his replacement is just not nowhere near that level, which would be my question to you actually. How do you see Gerard Martin? I mean, I've been getting that question for since the beginning of the season. Why would Flick play that guy? Why would he give him so much time when he's obviously not doing anything special on the pitch? So that I don't know, honestly. See, when I watch
Yeah,
him, he doesn't do much. Not much wrong, not much good in the stats. The stats say he's doing decently well in the duels, decently well in connecting with the players around him, but he just does nothing about him that's kind of stands out to me. And I do have to scout him a bit more, but that's my first impression. I don't really know what's wrong with that player, but he just doesn't bring anything to the table. But then again, why would Flick then I say insist, but he is kind of insisting on him as well.
yeah. I mean, I think I'm being too hard on him. To be honest with you, like I think I'm a little too harsh on Gerard Martin, but to that point, like I don't see it. I think some players aren't of the level, and I know that seems very dismissive to say like he's not at the level. Like defensively, I get the idea. Defensively, I think he's solid. He is. He's solid. Like for a player that was playing, what, he was 21 2 years ago when he was playing for Cornea in the third division. Like for a player that was playing in the third division, like that step up. And here's what I'll say, and I think the excuse as to why it's too early to jump out on him. He's been playing first top level football for 3 months, right? And he's got less than like 400 total minutes of top tier football under his belt. So if Hansi Flick is seeing something in training that he's able to compete at the level with his Barcelona teammates, then you just kind of have to trust him. Like especially in short field stuff, like that he's like defending Lamine Yamal because Lamine Yamal's on the right side, like that he's defending Lamine Yamal on the regular. So if Hansi Flick does see something, then we just have to kind of believe that very much. Like again, I bite my tongue because I was wrong about Costado from the third division last season making the step up here, and I'm not. And I think Costado was always a prospect for Barcelona. Like he was always a name that I did bring up, like as a player for the future of Barcelona's midfield. Like it's not like, you know what I mean? Like Gerard Martin again was in the Cornea Academy a few years ago and was never on the Barcelona radar until he signed at 21 years old to be the starter for Barca B or at the time, and then Barca Athletic. So I think defensively what he does is fine and could get better. I think he could have more confidence with his timing, especially on that high line, which is hard to play. And then I think his crossing is of the level though. I think his crossing so far, like he can play a final ball. He could do that with Barca Athletic last season. You saw all of those things. But to your point, like what does he do at the highest level? I'm not sure. And I think to help Barcelona and to be a player at the level that could win you trophies and consistently change games, I just don't see him doing that. Right. And I think that's why he's the backup. And he also, the argument would be financially, he's only the backup because Barcelona absolutely could not spend money on a backup left back because it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like financially, they didn't have
Yeah.
any money to spend anyway, right? So it's like they had to cut their losses at certain spots on the depth chart, and that is one of those spots, you know?
It's tricky. And on the other side, the reason I said Koundé initially for the last player, that's kind of undroppable. And the thing is with Koundé works best when he's paired up or analyzed in tandem with Lamine, right? So because Lamine and Koundé have this some sort of a sync, because Koundé knows how to dismark Lamine. He knows when to move, how to move, where to move to actually unlock Lamine. His best trait is actually unlocking Lamine. It's not the deep cross. It's not when he's giving those assists, 3 assists a game. That's not what Koundé is about. I think I've seen the best of Koundé when he was able to kind of do what Lamine needs him to do. That's kind of what when I look at Koundé and look at, for example, Victor Fort cannot do that. Fort may have the overlapping ability. Maybe he can go and attack the space and then whip those crosses in, which Koundé cannot do from a wide position if he's tightly marked. He just cannot do that. Fort might be able to do that, but Fort doesn't have that connection with Lamine. He cannot do what Koundé does for Lamine, and that's important because teams will eventually start. They are already starting to double up on Lamine. They're starting to devise plans specifically for Lamine, and having a right back who can kind of work in tandem with your right winger to kind of get the best out of him, enable him. That's to me that's very very important, especially
Yeah,
when
and
you have
I do want to credit Xavi on that though, because Xavi went through the lumps. Like I had in my notes a number of times last season for 5 headlines. I was like Koundé
hmm
and Lamine Yamal, like it wasn't working today, and I had
hmm
that in my notes like a
hmm
number of weeks last year.
yeah
And so Xavi was the one who kind of went through the learning curve with a 16-year-old and Koundé, who again was
yeah
not happy last season. Not that he's happy this season, but he was still like, "Hey, I don't want to be a right back last year," and you know what I mean. Like we were hearing that stuff, and
hmm
so they went through that together, the three of them, Xavi and Lamine Yamal and Koundé, and now we're seeing the reward this year of
yeah
putting in the time last season, having those little miscommunications and those mistakes and it not working out. And now
hmm
this season, you see, to your point, that partnership
yeah
it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's also kind of tricky because when you have one of them missing, so let's say Koundé is dropped and you have Ford, it doesn't work as well, right? But obviously,
Yeah.
when Lamine is off and then there's just Koundé there, for example, with Fermin up top, it just doesn't work at all because then Fermin, what happened against Sociedad was Koundé was asked to hold the whole flank, right? In several phases of possession, it was Koundé out wide, it was Fermin somewhere between the lines, and Koundé and Balde actually with the width holders at all times, very, very high, very, very wide, and just didn't work because Koundé cannot do those things for a wide position, especially when he's marked. So what For example, against Crvena Zvezda in the Champions League, we saw Kunde get all those assists because he was always in a lot of space. And when he's in a lot of space out wide, of course he can whip across and find his target. Most players at this highest level can do that, right, with enough time and space on the ball. But when you put Kunde in that same position, but with a marker on top of him, he can't replicate what Lamine does, for example. So you can't really have one without the other. Obviously, you can still have Lamine without Kunde, but it will be very different if you have Fort behind them and trying to enable him. And we saw Lamine numerous times when he's marked out of the game, which will happen because teams will devise plans for him. He gets frustrated as well. Of course he does. And Kunde kind of helps alleviate that problem. And then when you have no winger and just Kunde also struggles because he's not that type of player, right? He's not that type of wing back even. He's just someone who is a deep lying distributor from a slightly inverted area, even from the half spaces, and he can go wide. But if you give him the space, then he can make those passes. So that's kind of my thing with him.
Well, yeah, I think our research paper is done. Our thesis, nobody from that Gala 11 get hurt. I think it's our thesis
No.
from this show. The player who did get hurt, though, again, we're not really talking about this. It's not news, and we've gone over a million times. Ansu Fati, his latest muscle injury today, a hamstring injury, suffered in training, will keep him out at least 4 weeks, having him miss 6 more matches at least. And every time he gets hurt, everyone on the internet says this is the final straw for Ansu Fati. And maybe it is. I don't think it is, but also it is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, but it is. And it's a tough thing. And then Pau Cubarsí, what I mentioned at the top, was an injury call up to the Spanish national team. He apparently was like dizzy yesterday during training. So hopefully he's just there and doesn't play. There's no reason why he should play during this break in the UEFA Nations League. Like he might, but I don't think he should. Just the fact that he even had to get on a plane and go like is annoying. But at least it wasn't a lot of travel. I think all the games are in like Central Europe right now for them. So yeah. So again, it's just an unnecessary plane ride. He couldn't just stay at home and like heal up a little bit. So yeah, that's a concern for Pau Cubarsí. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt. And then last thing that we have to plug. I said at the start, so hopefully people are still here with us. I am going to be joining you guys for a special thing this weekend. So yeah, do you want to tell everybody what you signed me up for? Maybe do too much extra homework, but I'm happy to do.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to promote this. Yeah, so this Saturday at 12 noon UK time, we will host a live session with Dan and Dev and one other guest that we have. And basically a Barca, for what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a Barcelona fantasy league. And this Saturday, this will be the first episode, the test episode, where we have Dan and one other guest kind of make their own dream teams, Barcelona dream teams. We've given them a budget of 150 million euros to use, and they can make 4 signings to kind of reinforce Flex Barcelona. And then we'll try and see how would those dream teams actually play tactically and also through data as well. So it will be kind of an imaginary scenario where we put big players, star players into this Barca and see how would that actually work. Because many people out there, myself included, Dan included, we always like to imagine, okay, this player would be perfect for Barcelona, this player should be signed for Barcelona, but how would that actually work tactically? And this Saturday we'll try to answer that question and see, at least in theory, how that will work. We'll do some tactics board stuff, we'll do some data, we'll do some discussions, and then you guys, the viewers, the live viewers, will be the voters, and you'll decide, who made the best dream Barcelona team, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, see you on Saturday.
Yeah, I look forward to it. So yeah, we'll have a little bit of fun, and then that inspired me. So for people who be missing the watch alongs and everything on Big Up, the plan right now is for me next week, I'm going to do some transfer talk. I think that'll get enough people buzzing. So some of the ideas that I take from your show, I'm going to do a show on Big Up next week for that. I might try to have a guest, it might be by myself, but I hope everyone again joins me on Big Up for that. I will promote it, make sure that everyone is over there to help me out with that. So all right, that's about it. Again, for Domagoj, you can follow him and Dev. That's Barca Football down in the description. Everywhere else, you can find him on social media as well. Or me, Hilton D13, Barcelona Podcast, everywhere. Remember, I have the merch store, Patreon, $3, how I keep making these shows. The team is good, so people are excited, and I really appreciate that. Like, people are watching this stuff, people are listening. Vibes are good. So as you all know, I like to keep it moving, keep going forward, and even with another international break, we're going to, we're on the up. We didn't even talk about Gavi. We might be 3 months away from saying if Gavi goes down, Barcelona trouble, because Gavi coming back might be that Barcelona are not just one injury away, because they might be getting Gavi back and then, and good things could happen. So I think Gabi would want us to say it. Domagoj. Until next time, Forza Barça.